He gave the ball up on the right side to a freshman named Stephen Thomas, who's a 5-man running the floor like he's supposed to. I get emotional about this still to this day. Like, the kid lifts up, makes the shot off the glass just like he was taught. The entire bench jumps up and yells, "Flanker!" And I was like still today, I get emotional. I think about it. This guy has everybody on the same page. He just got D.A. Lane to give the ball up in transition, who, probably wants to be the hero. Is just wired that way. He's wired to be the guy that wants to take the shot. And I'm telling you, I knew it. I was like, man, this guy can coach.
Hi, I'm Corey Baldwin.
And I'm Dan Searle, and we are back on Off the Beaten Path. This is the podcast for hoops coaches and coaches in general who are living in obscurity, working in obscurity, and even those who have made it along the path and out of obscurity, right?
Place for storytelling, and even some of those stories are true. Reconnecting at times, and food for thought, and my favorite part, food for the belly. Oh, it's a special one. We have a journeyman of sorts that is now settled down and became a administrator. One of our few rare ADs we'll have on here so far, and but he started out winning a bunch of games. He was an assistant at UGA and assistant at Townsend, Belmont Abbey, and then the head coach. Let's jump right in. Tell us about, how in the world did you get started in hoops? What got you going?
Yeah, it is a bit of a non-traditional story. I guess it really starts off with being a little kid and pretty decent basketball player growing up in the state of North Carolina. Chapel Hill's campus was my playground. My father ran the PBS station at UNC when I was a little kid in the early 70s. And I actually was a decent enough basketball player to run around to all the fraternity houses and play pickup with those guys and hold my own. And so I thought that's what I was going to do. But the reality sunk in when I got to high school, and I was in New York City at this point at Xavier High School, and the caliber of the play was pretty high. And I was 5'2" and 85 pounds as a sophomore in high school. And I could play a little bit, but it didn't really matter a whole lot. It's the only knock I have on the sport of basketball is that, if you don't have a certain amount of height, verticality, and length, it can be a bit challenging sometimes to play the sport. But so I really got away from basketball for a while, to be honest. Played a lot and pick up and all that kind of stuff, but no formal organized basketball. And then I went to Ireland. I completed an undergraduate degree at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I've done a master's degree at the University of Georgia. I'm in English literature. I think I'm going to go work at a Research One institution. That's my path. So a little bit of a divergence. I go and work, go to the Samuel Beckett Center. It's its first year at the University at Trinity College Dublin. I have some connections that helped me get into that class and go over there. And so I'm reading Anglo-Irish literature. I'm reading basically 20th century drama. This is late 1990s. And I can read the play in the morning. I can talk about it with my peers in the afternoon. I can go see it at night. And in between, I can drink a Guinness or two. So it's a pretty good gig. But then I also started playing basketball again because I had grown to the astounding height of about 5'11". And the level of play wasn't terribly high, to be honest. And so all of a sudden I was decent again. And so I started playing around the country and running around and having a lot of fun doing that. And then I got asked to coach. And I think the only reason I got asked to coach is because I was American. I literally think that is the only reason. They figure, well, you're American, you know something. Yeah. So they made that assumption. And I coached the equivalent of our JV or our B team or whatever. And I will say we never lost a game during my short tenure of, I think, of one whole semester or whatever it was. We played probably 7 or 8 games and we won them. And that gave me the bug. And what happened was I wrote Ron Jersa at the University of Georgia a letter. And I said, hey, I think I'd like to come help you all out. And I was so naive to how things worked in the business that when I got a form letter back from Sandy Bear, who was his assistant and Coach Harrick's assistant after, it just basically said, thanks for your letter. I almost said email there. Back there wasn't the email, but thanks for your letter, and come on by and see us, but I didn't know it was a you bother me kid, go away. It was I thought it was real. So I show up in December, January, because we graduated late there. Anyway, long story, I stuck around and hung around in Dublin a little bit longer. I come on back and I show up in the office and I'm like, hey, I'm here. Let's go, And they're like, and you are again? Who are you? And I'm like, well, I remember I sent that letter and they're like, no, so basically how that all played out was, again, go away. And I was pretty persistent. I said to them, well, can I just come to practice?
Hey, Miss, let's pause for a second, because what you're doing right now, you're about to make this the fastest Off the Beaten Path podcast ever.
Okay.
So we're going to cut you off and go backwards 3 steps, because we want to focus in on what you're about to tell us. But North Carolina, running the frat courts at UNC. Why'd you go to New York? Why'd you go to Xavier?
So going back to playing it in Chapel Hill as a little kid, right? So I grew up in around Chapel Hill. If they had a contest in any of the rec centers in Hillsborough, Carrboro, Chapel, any of those, I would go to those things and I would win them. Like, skills contests, all these kinds of things, and I would win those all the time, because it didn't matter that I was little, because it was, it was just you and a clock, or you and how many free throws can you make, or you and a cone, all that kind of stuff. And so I'd go over and play on the courts, and actually I got a little bit of a reputation in town. They're the best player at the time, I thought, on the team was Mike O'Corin. He'd come down from New Jersey. He was a great at playing the NBA. And so they started calling me Little O'Corin. And so I was going around town, and I thought that was big time. Like for at the time, to me, these 18 to 20-year-old dudes, I was probably 8, 9, 10, 11, calling me Little O'Corin, and I could get in the games. I didn't have to wait for 8 hours or get told, you'll never get on the court. Like, it was kind of cool, so I loved all that. It was a way that when I moved with my family to Frederick, Maryland, and then later to Englewood, New Jersey, that I could make friends in the neighborhood quickly. Because again, as a little kid, and I stayed little, you would have a lot of kids come around, and they would really want to, use you as a way to establish their place in the pecking order. So I would, I ran the risk of getting bullied a lot. So I learned 2 things pretty quick. I was pretty good with my tongue. I could cut people down pretty good with various comebacks and things like that. But again, that could exacerbate the beatdown potential, right? Because if the other guy wasn't as facile intellectually, then he was going to resort to physical solutions. And so I bore the brunt of some of those physical solutions from time to time. But really, the thing that saved me was the fact that I could play a little bit of basketball. So when I moved to Frederick, Maryland, there was a school there, St. John's Prospect Hall, which is kind of a storied tradition school eventually, especially for their prep school. So I was in their little feeder program, and I could play there and make friends and do that kind of stuff. And, it's a little bit of a sidebar, but the thing that's really amazing to me back then is how I feel like a lot of the students that we work with today really lack conflict resolution skills. It's one of the biggest deficits I think that they face. But we didn't have that issue because we were constantly left alone. There were no parents around. We weren't supervised all the time. And so we figured out who was shirts and skins. We picked our teams. We enforced the rules, whether we made them up on the fly or not. Whoever, maybe was the biggest kid might be able to change the rules at the last second. It wasn't always fair. It wasn't always equitable. That also helped prepare us, I think, for life a little bit, which is also that way. But anyway, so I know it's a little bit of a sidebar, but I think I really valued the fact that we moved a few times, although it stunk to leave friends behind. That helped me with learning how to resolve issues, how to get along with new people. And really, basketball for me was a vehicle to get to know people. And then, when you go to New York, right, and I started going to Xavier High School, and I think I'm going to try and be on the team there. And I ended up playing 3 sports at Xavier, but basketball was not one of them. But I spent a lot of time at West 4th Street. You go to Rucker, you go to those places just to see those dudes play, and to watch the legends and all that kind of stuff. And so that was really cool. And my high school literally was maybe 12 blocks from West 4th Street court. So you could walk there and catch virtually the same train that you were going to take at my stop, 10 blocks away roughly, and go watch her play over there. And so lots of great experiences with that.
See, that's exactly, you call them sidebars and we don't want to get involved. No, this is exactly what we want to hear. This is clearly part of what's shaped you, and that's part of the fun here in the storytelling.
Yes. So now walk us a little bit through Ireland again, not to make you recap everything, but when you were coaching, you said you got about 7 or 8 games. How old are these guys you're coaching, and what would you compare it to over here? Is it almost like a summer league team, a rec league team, or would you consider it high school, lower level college? What would you consider it?
Okay. So when I was in Ireland, one of the beauties of participating, so I was on Trinity College's team, the A team, and they played in a sort of this lower level pro tier and also this collegiate. So you did both at the same time. And so we would play at what they called the NBA, the National Basketball Arena, which was out by the airport in Dublin. But we would also play in Cork, and we would also play in Belfast, and we'd also play in Galway. So we went to all these places. It's part of the way I saw Ireland, quite honestly. You know, it's different seeing it from a bus in a gym. It's not the same as traveling around and actually seeing the place. But you know, you go to Limerick, and you go to all these places. So I'm doing all that, and I'm the starting point guard. And there's some flux going on with the coaching staff all the time, because the way they're really working that over there is the top flight professional team. They're American, essentially. They got 2 Americans on that team. They're subsidizing his compensation by having him go coach somewhere. So that's really what's going on here. But a lot of those guys are not as committed to the coaching piece as they are to the playing professionally piece. Some of them haven't had no coaching experience prior. So it may not be their forte. So there's some fluidity oftentimes in these situations. And so they're asking various people to step in, help out. So I get asked to step in and coach what I would call the equivalent of the JV team, or the developmental, what we call here at Belmont Abbey College, the developmental team. So it's the second tier guys, not quite good enough to be on our top team. Our top team consists of primarily American students who were over at Trinity doing whether they're doing an undergraduate, or in my case, I was doing what they call a MPhil, Master in Philosophies. And that's basically what our team was comprised of. And so the guys I coached, I don't know, Corey or Dan, I don't know, the equivalent might be probably a decent high school JV team. You know, that's probably the caliber of talent, something like that. There was a lot more Irish guys on that team who loved basketball, but hadn't really started playing until they were 12 or 13. Back to, you know, Dan's point earlier, they had played a lot of football. They might have played a lot of Gaelic. They might have played all these other, these other sports that are available there. So they kind of like a Tim Duncan scenario. They had great footwork. You know, they were pretty fluid, but they had no idea how to play basketball, and they certainly didn't see the game, quote unquote. You know, it was very mechanic and robotic the way they did it. So anyway, we just went and played these games almost like double headers kind of thing with the varsity and JV. And so I'd coach one game, and then I'd take off those clothes and go play the other game, and or vice versa. And so anyway, that's kind of how that went.
That's a great gig. You get to coach them up, then you get to play it out. Oh man, listen. So you say matter of factly, your MPhil, your master's in philosophy in Dublin, Ireland. That's big time right there. So good for you there. You mentioned earlier the coaching bug. So this was the first time you're doing this, and you got the coaching bug. What was that bug? What was that feeling? Or was there a moment or a kid or a game that you coached that you said, man, I like this. I want to do this. I'm gonna write a letter to Ron Jersa.
You know, it was interesting because I don't know, basketball was such, I mean, literally, you're talking to a guy that grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, that watched with tremendous envy the kids walk across the parking lot over to the dormitories where they were living, Glenville Towers, it was called, or Granville Towers, excuse me, they were in Granville Towers, and watch those kids check into camp and then go over to Carmichael or go over to Woolen, and just was so envious, so jealous, and wanted to be that kid so badly. And just, it wasn't in the cards for me at that time. And so I literally grew up thinking that Dean Smith should be the governor of the state of North Carolina, you know, that he walked on water, you know, just worship Phil Ford and just guys like that. It was, I mean, I remember being in Carmichael, watching us play the Russian national team in a lead up game to the, I think, 76 Olympics, and just thinking I died and gone to heaven just to be in the gym, right? Just to be there was such a big deal to me. And so I lived it, breathed it, loved it. It was everything to me as a little kid growing up. And then it just wasn't in the cards for me to be a player, right? And so I got away from it. But as soon as I got reconnected with the game, to your question, it was immediate. it was immediate. Like I immediately was like, wait a second, my whole path, and again, backing up, my original path was to go work on the Kabuto Cho, which was the Japanese stock exchange. So I majored at Chapel Hill in English, which was for fun, economics, and studied Japanese while I was there. So I had it all figured out. I was going to work on Wall Street. I knew exactly what I was going to do. Fast forward, I go to work at Lehman Brothers. I get a job. Fortunately, I get a job making minimum wage, cold calling, because the guy interviewing this whole pool of candidates had been on, I actually fenced at Chapel Hill, had been on the fencing team. And so he gave me the gig. And so I get this gig. I worked for Lehman Brothers for a while. I end up working with another guy who takes me to a chop shop down on Wall. I do that for a few months and I absolutely hate it. Hate it, Dan, like hate it, Corey. And so I'm like, I got to get out of this. So I ended up getting out. So I thought I had it all planned. What I was going to do. My next path was going to be, all right, well, I'm just going to be a research one college professor. I'll do a lot of research. I had an uncle who was he's not my uncle by blood. He was in seminary with my father. But he was a Faulknerian scholar of renown. He was Walker Percy's authorized biographer. He was really well known in these circles of Southern Lit. So I had an in, I was going to do that. And that's why I'm over at Trinity. In fact, it's because of all that stuff. So now I'm in that world. And then literally I start playing for the varsity and coaching. Once I started coaching, I mean, I probably wrote that letter. This is probably not exactly the way it went, but the first night after the first practice, you know, like this is what I think I might want to do. If you'll give me the entree. Now I was still, this will go back to my Wall Street days. I was still hedging my bets. I was not going to stop pursuing my PhD, which I continued to pursue at Georgia upon return. I wanted to do this in addition to, not in lieu of, at least at this early stage. But yeah, I mean, I was all about it. And when I walked into the basketball offices at Georgia, I really thought that they were just going to welcome me with open arms and say, come on, help us out, you know, because I knew nothing about how it worked. Nothing, you know.
Hey, Miss, we got to stop you right there for 1 second. I don't know. Well, actually, I do know. We've never had a guest on Wall Street. Probably never had one know multiple languages other than Searle, who's a co-host. We've never had one with a PhD.
I don't have a PhD.
Oh, you don't have it yet. Work towards it.
Well, I'm virtually ABD, but I don't have a PhD. But I do have 2 masters.
And then the last part is that I like the fencing team. I know you've got to be the only head Division II coach when you were at Belmont Ivy that had fenced in college. How does fencing compare for someone ignorant about fencing like myself to helping you prep as a coach or dealing with athletes in basketball?
All right, before I respond to that question, I got to know who the little guy is over your left shoulder.
Oh yeah, he's trying to sneak in. I apologize. Say what's up, Logan, so you can get your attention.
It's the photo bomb. What's your name, photo bomber?
Logan.
Logan. Nice to meet you, Logan.
Nice to meet you.
All right, so
You know.
it's actually a great question. I've never really been asked or thought about that, to be honest with you. So I'm off the hip right now about what comparison or overlap is there between fencing and basketball. You know, you fence alone. So, I mean, it's one of those individual sports and a team dynamic, sort of like track and field and some of the tennis and golf. And so you fence alone. I was a foilist, and that's a bit extreme to say I was anything, to be honest with you. I'll tell you how this evolved. I'm at Chapel Hill. I'm in my first semester. I have a roommate who's from Cyprus, and he says, "Hey, I'm gonna take fencing as a PE. You want to do that?" And I'm kind of like, whatever, you know, sure. So I get in the fencing class with this guy. At the end of the class, they have a tournament. And I think I win the tournament. If I don't win the tournament, I come in second. Anyway, so again, it kind of goes well. So I take fencing too. And same kind of thing happens. So then over the summer, I get in really great shape and I try out for the fencing team and I make the team in the fall. Even though they have this big debate, the coach and everybody like, this guy's really old. Like, I'm older than everybody else. But do we really want this guy around? He's probably going to graduate after this year. So anyway, they let me on the team, and I ended up staying at Carolina an additional year, in part, mainly because of academic reasons, but in part because I wanted to fence for another year. And I actually worked my way into the kind of starting rotation a little bit in that second year. And this guy, I have to tell you all this. I mean, you may cut it, but I have to tell you all this. The guy, his name is Ron Miller. He just retired. amazing coach. He would take people like, he took this woman, I remember when I was there, who was on the women's soccer program, right? She played for Dora. She's obviously a stud athlete. She blows both her knees out. She can't play soccer anymore. And this is what this guy would do. He would go around and find all these people that had tremendous athleticism, but had never fenced really. And within a year or two, he would make them better fencers than the kids who had been doing it forever. And it's probably not a fair, I'm broad brush painting right now, but the stereotype a little bit is these were like Dungeons and Dragons types kids that they lacked athleticism in general, but they were cerebral, right? They were smart. So they knew how to fence a little bit because they had done it for a long time. But he could take these athletic kids and kick those other kids' butts in 6 months to a year by teaching them. So he taught this one lady, I remember she was like the third best foilist in the country, like after a year of working with him. It was just crazy. But there's 3 weapons, foil, epee, and saber, and I was a foilist. I guess it's much more about the intellectual was where I would go, maybe, Corey, to answer your question directly of where the connection would be. But you're not working with teammates, right? So it would be more the one-on-one basketball. All right, let's play chess or checkers, with this guy. The checkers guys are all playing, hey, I'm going to catch it and shoot, or I'm going to catch it and drive to my strong hand. The chess guys are going to jab you one way, pump fake you the other, all that kind of, just when you start getting more intellectual one-on-one type stuff of how I'm going to set you up to get to the spot where I know I'm going to make the shot, right? So is it going to take, one move because you know what I'm trying to do, and so I'm going to my counter? Is it going to take 2 moves because you know that I'm going to fake my counter and come back to my strong? Those kinds of things I think might be where, because when you start talking about making a lunge or making an extension and then the repost, and then you can repost and all this kind of, it gets really, when you watch great fencers, they're like 6 moves ahead. It's all set up.
Twitter.
I'm sorry.
You're not talking about Twitter with your repost.
No, I'm not tweeting or reposting that way. It's a counter repost to an initial thrust kind of concept in fencing. But literally, the great fencers are honestly thinking 7 and 8 and 9 moves ahead. So that's why I liken it more to the chess player. And that's one of the things we try to talk a lot about when I was coaching was like, don't be a checkers guy, be a chess guy. It's everybody knows the first go-to move. They've all read the scouting report, right? So you're going to have to set them up to get what you want. You can't just rely on it's just going to come easy.
Did you get to wear the Phil Ford number 12 in your fencing team, or did they not do numbers there?
So that's a great question. No, we didn't wear numbers, but okay. 12 was my number. And to this day, Corey, that's like my favorite number, to be honest. It was always 12 was the number. I probably have that on so many lockers and locker codes, or if I walk into a locker room and I can pick a locker, I walk to 12, and that's kind of funny, but that's where that all originated.
So now we're down in Georgia. We think we're rolling in and we're going to help Jerser out. What happens next?
Basically I get rebuffed and told, thanks, but no thanks. And I counter to that repost with can I just show up to practice? And I think they're sort of like, sure, you can come to practice, thinking I will come once or twice. And I came to every single practice they ran from that point forward in the Stegman Coliseum for the rest of the year. And I sat there and took notes at every practice. And at first it was a lot of notes because I really knew nothing. So I was trying to write down every drill they did, or why were they doing the drills in that progression, or why do they break down guards and posts? Just all this stuff that, to anyone listening, this is probably seems so elemental, but to me, it was all new. I would be asked repeatedly they'd send the managers up, who are you? Why are you here? Are you with the press? Or are you scouting for some other team, or just things like that all the time? I was like, no, coach said I could come to practice. I'm just trying to learn. And so eventually what happened is that summer, I kept pestering them. I kept trying to sell them on the idea of, hey, Coach Jersa, I can help you bridge the gap because I'm studying, I'm working on my PhD. I'm teaching a couple classes. I know the faculty. I can help you with your students. And again, I didn't know how it all worked. So I didn't know they had a whole academic resource center. I'll talk to you about, if you ask, Susan Leahy and Corey Kapanis and Glada Horvat and all these people that were really great that did this amazing job over there helping all these students. But I didn't know about that all being there. So I was like, hey, I can help you with that. I can help them with, making sure they're getting their homework done on time, whether it's time management or just all that stuff. So finally, we mentioned Jermaine Jones before we started. He kind of thought, all right, maybe you can work with Jermaine, and that might be beneficial to the program. But that only happened after I filmed officials camp for them during the summer, during their team camp, because they had this little thing going where they would make money off the team camps, but also and recruit, but also let the officials come in and then run their camp. And so I ran a camera for officials camp and let everybody yell at me and tell me what I didn't know what I was doing on that. And for a couple weeks, and I guess they thought, well, he showed up for that, and we yelled at him. He didn't go away. So eventually, I sold him on this idea of let me help Jermaine. It didn't end up working out because of compliance concerns that they couldn't really have me doing that at that stage. So they broke down finally and allowed me to be a manager again. Essentially, I guess I could call myself a GA if you wanted, but I don't even think that would be kind of glorified to be really what it was. And the head manager at the time was a guy named Marcus Wiedauer, and Andy Brown was on that staff, and Lee Miller was in his first year when I started, is my recollection. So these were all three, like 17 to 20-year-old kind of kids, and here I was 30, trying to be a manager, GA, whatever. But I did start then working with the students, with their academics. And I'd always be grateful to a couple of those, Gigi Smith and John Nordine and Michael Chadwick and Rob Dryden, Eric DeYoung. I'm forgetting some of them, probably were really kind to me, and that they allowed me to interact with them in this way. Because they could have just been like, get out of here, but they actually kind of took me in, and they knew that I was trying to help. And I think they believed that I was really committed to trying to learn, And so I worked a little bit with Jermaine, but he graduated right after that year. There's a whole long story about how it transitions into Coach Harrick from Coach Jersa. But I guess the two things I want to say wrapping this up really is just, again, I'm reiterating how grateful I was to the students for welcoming, and the coaching staff ultimately for welcoming, and mainly to Coach Jersa for giving me my chance. Like, I actually talked to Coach Jersa the other day. He just retired from UNC Greensboro after a very long career, many, many stops. He started off, by the way, I think he might have started at Gettysburg where he played, but he was an assistant coach at Belmont Abbey College at one point on his journey. Much like Greg Marshall was an assistant coach at Belmont Abbey College. And we can talk about great coaches at Belmont Abbey later, but yeah, Coach Jersa gave me my first chance, and I'll always be indebted to him. It's a little bit like your first signee, right? I mean, Kashif Gums, Corey Baldwin, who's a guy that was going crazy at Ape and Run and Shoot one summer, you told me about right after I got the job. And it's the only time I've given a guy scholarships, pretty much sight unseen, in August. But I just got the job in August, and I had a scholarship, and you told me about Kashif Gums, and Kashif Gums and I will be friends for the rest of our lives, mainly, if no other reason, because it's the first guy I ever signed, So Coach Jersa I will always be indebted to, because he's the guy that gave me a chance to put my foot in the door, and we started off 12-3 that year. It was pretty good. Didn't end well, but.
So why did you not leave? Why did they not run you off, working officials camps, yelling at you, saying, we don't really need you? Are you press? Are you media? Get out.
Basketball. I mean, you may throw away virtually everything I say to you today. This next thing might actually matter. They're like, there is no replicating the intimacy of a locker room and a practice, Jim. I will go to my grave probably never having found anything more rewarding professionally than working with 15 guys on a day-to-day. Games are okay. Games are okay. I don't love games as much as I love practice. The locker room I loved. I loved the 2 years of recruiting them. I love the 4 years of being with them. I love the 40 and 50 years, hopefully, that we'll have together post that experience. I love getting invited to the weddings now, hearing about the children, hearing about their successes professionally. Those bonds, those connections are just different. Being an administrator has a lot of benefits. We can talk about that if you'd like to, but it's not the same. There's a remove. And all of us who have coached, I kind of make this, it's a bad analogy perhaps, because I don't really know what I'm talking about. So I'll do the little tap here on my vein. I've never done heroin. I don't know what it's like, but I'll tell you this, there's no replicating, there's no replacing the intimacy of the locker room. And whether it's kosher, not kosher, cool, not cool, whatever, I will tell you that I love the guys I coached. I don't know if they love me, but I love them. And I'm very grateful to them. And the guys I coached with, the guys who, devoted their time and energy to trying to make us better. It's just different, man. It's just so different. And basketball to me is different. I think there's only two sports in the world that matter. This isn't fair and it'll make me unpopular, but soccer and basketball are the two best sports in the world. And the main reason is because of the socioeconomic factors. Basketball is a little more expensive than soccer because you kind of need a rim. You can replicate it other ways, but I kind of feel like you sort of do need a rim. Soccer, you need nothing. You need nothing. You get some newspaper and some space, and you can pretend and make some sort of barrier. Outline of a field, and you don't even need goals. Put two shirts down. You need nothing to play soccer. And so that's why I think they are the two most popular sports throughout the world. In some ways, they might be the best for other reasons as well, but there's just no socioeconomic barrier to playing those two sports. And really, both of those sports are team games, which is also one of the reasons they're great, but you're really going to hone most of the time your individual skill. So you don't need other people to get better as a basketball player necessarily. And you don't need money to play those sports. Now, yes, there's difference between having access to resources. Corey's guys that are in the back seat, it looks to me like he might be wearing a jersey right now, and that he shows gratitude for that. But really, if you're like I was as a little kid, I'll go to fraternity house and find a pickup. I don't need anything but mom and dad to say, hey, you can go there. You're allowed to go. That's all I need. So yeah, I just, I lack Coach Harrick's, he taught me KISS, keep it simple, stupid. I lack his succinctness. I'm long-winded relative to him, and it's something I try to work on. It's getting more succinct and more precise with my language, but it really is, though I apologize for the long-windedness of the answer, it is the impossibility to replicate the intimacy of a locker room. That's what I miss. That's why I sat in that gym by myself and took notes all those days. That's why, hey, I got to give a shout out to two guys that nobody knows, but Jason Smith and Robert Beldick. And there's a third guy whose name I don't even remember right now, but they let me sleep in their basement. I didn't have anybody to live, coming back kind of for a little while, coming back from Ireland as far as all this stuff goes. And I stayed in their basement and ran and watched those practices. And those guys, now I paid them a little something. I can't remember what it was now, but they allowed that, they let me crash essentially. And then I ended up living with those guys after that. And those guys, I talk to those guys still today about things, but that was part of what enabled me to do that. But my desire and my drive was really, Dan, Corey, it was just basketball. It was just, in my mind, the most amazing game. And I just wanted to, like I said, Dean Smith walked on water to me. I just wanted to be like him. And when we get around to talking about Coach Harrick, I'll tell you he's probably in the top 3 most influential men in my life. And I'll tell you that I spent a lot of time trying to be Jim Harrick. It was stupid, I now know, and he told me not to, but I wanted people to look at me the way I looked at and others looked at Jim Harrick, the way people responded to him. One of the most charismatic men I've ever met. The only guy I know really right now, and I don't know anybody coaching anymore because I've been out of it for a while, but the only guy that even comes close to Coach Harrick that I've encountered is Jonas Hayes. As far as when he walks into a room, the way everyone immediately there's an elevation of the energy and the vibe in that room. Just like, I haven't been down yet to Georgia State, but I bet his guys, they're so lucky to have him as their head coach. Because I'm sure every time he walks in that room, he used to say here when we were here, he came up with this phrase that I've stolen. He'd go, hey, this was in the weight room, right? So we'd be in the weight room and he would yell out to everybody, if you ain't lifting, you're lifting. And I was like, wow, that's brilliant. That's just absolutely brilliant. Because what he was basically saying is if you're not doing the physical lift, then you're energizing the person or the others in the room that are doing the lift and lifting them up. So you're always elevating. You always are engaged. You always are involved. And so Jim Harrick for me he was always lifting, and Jonas Hayes, I just mentioned him as somebody that I know and y'all know, who is the closest approximation of anything I've ever seen to Jim Harrick. And so it was this heroin thing for me. I wanted that feeling. I wanted that feeling of being up nearly 20 in the second round of the national tournament, thinking we're going to the Sweet 16. Even though we messed around and lost that game and made Bruce Rubber's career for him, got him the Illinois job, I wanted that feeling over and over and over again, because I knew everything that it took for Coach Harrick to make that happen and how special it was.
So now walk us through the move. You mentioned it. You've obviously mentioned Harrick, but I think for a lot of our listeners, especially from your standpoint now. You're going to tell a story from where you were then, but from where you are now as an administrator, looking back when that move was made from Jersey to Harrick, some of the things that influenced so many people. You mentioned Sandy, the secretary, you mentioned yourself, managers, so many people, not just the players and the assistants are affected. Talk to us some about all those transitions before you give us some more Harrick love.
It's probably going to come across as hyperbolic, but I think Coach Harrick's hire changed Athens. Like it just changed. It changed UG. It just changed everything as far as the vibe. We were 8-20 his first year, and the only reason we were 8-20 is he brought in Sean Coleman and Anthony Evans, 2 junior college guys, or we might have been, -3 and 35 or something. I don't know what we would have been without those 2 guys coming into the fold. And then, he did stuff like, I'm not, again, as you started this whole thing, some of these stories are true. I'm not trying to tell the story in a non-truthful way intentionally. I just may not recall it properly. But I remember, I think Wayne.
It's better than some guests.
So
caveats to start.
So, yeah, I'm not deliberately embellishing here, but we had a guard. I think he was a sophomore at the time. He went for, I think, 28 in the last game at Vanderbilt, Coach Harrick's first year. And Coach said he's not good enough to play at this level, and he's going to be more successful and happier somewhere else. And so that guy transferred. Now, he did end up being all conference at the level he played at, and we did end up replacing him with guys like Jarvis Hayes. So it was things like that Coach saw that, how many people are going to tell a guy who just dropped 28 against an SEC opponent that you probably would be better off playing somewhere else, and then be able to facilitate it too. Like, he didn't just like, hey, you got to go, see you, good luck. He coordinated. Like, I'll give you a great example of lives being changed dramatically. Jim Harrick gets a job. He comes in. He retains Michael Hunt, who Dan Searle and I both worked for, and he retains Reggie Rankin. Who retains 2 guys off of a previous? I mean, I don't know about y'all's experience. I've gone through it twice where I've been on staffs that were dead men walking, and nobody got retained either time. So he keeps 2 people. Coach Rankin has a daughter who's born with a cleft palate at the time. I don't know 100%, but my understanding is that in part he keeps Coach Rankin because of that situation and doesn't want to make him have to deal with that situation without a job. So he keeps him for a year, and then he helps him go work with Barry Collier at Nebraska, gets him a better job as far as the profession goes, right? A better job. And that was the deal they struck, was, well, I'll keep you, but we're going to move you, but you need to stay for this time. And then Reggie Rankin gives me the tremendous gift of saying, I'm a coach. I'm not an administrator. At the time, we didn't have a director of basketball operations. We just had an admin, administrative assistant. And that was Travis Schlenk under Coach Jersa, now the general manager of the Atlanta Hawks, who I learned a great deal from, and was very generous to me in sharing his time. As was Coach Rankin, as was Coach Hunt, as was Coach Jerry Waters. Coach Rankin basically says to me, and as you guys probably have referred to me, and everybody, for a long time, I had no other name but Miss. I was just Miss. I wasn't Coach Miss. I wasn't Stephen Miss. I was just Miss. And so he said, Miss, I'm not an administrator. You do all that stuff. I'm going to keep doing what I do and what I know how to do and all that. And so Coach Rankin gave me this tremendous gift and did me this tremendous favor of having me do a lot of that stuff, so that when he left and went to Nebraska and worked with Coach Collier, Coach Harrick now had an opening on his staff, right? At this time, we have Michael Hunt, James Holland, Jeff Dunlap as the 3 on the floor, on the road assistants under Coach. And Coach Rankin has now just left. And so the admin position is open. That's our staff, besides Sandy Bear and Mike Clanton, our athletic trainer, and Eric Fears, our strength and conditioning coach, and Jack, I'm forgetting Jack's last name. We just call him Jack Allright, who is our equipment manager. So we have all these guys, right, that are doing this tremendous job. And so his spot's open. And so Coach is looking for someone to fill that spot. And as you guys know, those spots normally get filled. Can you deliver a dude? Essentially, right? That's what it's all kind of boils down to. Can you deliver a dude? And so I say, Coach, I'd like the job. And he said, well, let's just see. And the other three guys say to me, hey, just keep doing the job. Just keep doing the job. You've been doing it. He might forget, he may just forget, So it's one of the great pieces of advice I ever got. If you want the job, just do the job, And so I just kept doing the job, and some things broke my way. Some people I think turned him down that he might have, wanted to have do the job or whatever. And so eventually he hired me. And it was only later when I came to understand how the profession really works that I really appreciated the gift he gave me, because really there was no reason at all to give me that job at that level. There was much better things he probably could have accomplished on the short term by giving that job to someone else. But he gave me the opportunity. I'd like to think I ran with it and did it well. Another example of him of just being super generous is, I got approached to go take a class and help run a program at Oxford, England. The first two summers I worked for him. A lot of guys would have been like, nah, I need you here. He thought that was great. He thought that was going to be an opportunity for us to promote the program. And hey, we've got somebody on our staff who's a scholar and kind of validates us from an academic standpoint. He let me go do those. It was a month. I was gone for a good month, or I don't even remember, maybe 6 weeks even of those summers. So he's a man short both those times, but he saw the big picture of the benefit of that. He thought not only to myself, but to the program. So yeah, he was just always doing things like that and helping people. I think he's one of the most misunderstood people publicly, externally in basketball. And I think he's one of the most revered and loved people I've ever come across within his circle. I mean, if you go to the Final Four and ever get the opportunity to sit with that group of Larry Farmer and JD and Holland and Rank, all those, it's a love fest. If you're from the outside, it's probably disgusting. It's probably like, get me out of here. You guys are so over the top, but which is how we feel about Coach. And it's just his way. It's not like he's doing anything. He's just being himself.
Well, we absolutely believe that. We've heard that from you, from Steve Miss, from people that we know in basketball. But you said one of the most misunderstood, Coach Harrick. Why do you say that? What do you think some of those impressions from the outside are?
Well, because I think people on the outside, they hear about, well, this went down at UCLA, or they hear about how things ended at Georgia, or they hear about various other things. And they from that little bit of those snippets of information, they formulate a perception. And Marshall McLuhan said perception is reality. And I guess for the individual, perception becomes reality, right? But it's not necessarily, it might be true. Perception might be true for the individual, but it's not necessarily truth. And what I think is so remarkable about Coach is when you think about the fact that, I mean, just off the top of my head, not even really prepping or anything beforehand, think about the fact that he coached the game where Pepperdine loses NC State, where he's got his best free throw shooter on the line to win the game. And 99 times out of 100, that guy makes some of those free throws at least. And they move on, and the whole NC State, survive and advance, miracle never happens, right? Never happens. So he has Pepperdine in the national tournament playing big time basketball. He gets the UCLA job, and that's a whole story in and of itself, how he evolves and eventually gets it. He's beyond underdog, how he gets the UCLA job. He's not the first, second, third, or probably even 48th choice, right? But he gets the UCLA job. He's the only guy to win a national championship there since Coach Wooden, right? I mean, there's been some great coaches there. Now, there've been some Final Fours, there's even been, but no one else has won it but Coach Harrick. Then he goes to Rhode Island. I mean, other than maybe in a little stint in the 50s and 60s, who's heard of Rhode Island basketball, And he gets them within a shot, literally a shot of the Final Four. They have a shot to win an Elite Eight game. And then he comes to Georgia, and like I said, we were not very good when he inherited the team. And within his second year, we're in the national tournament. 2 years on a program that he took over. We're in the national tournament, and Missouri hits a big shot at the buzzer for us to lose that game. Otherwise, because Rashad Wright, a freshman, makes a huge shot to tie the game with a few seconds to go. And we're on the cusp. The following year, we win a round and against Murray State. Jonas Hayes comes off starts that game because we have some illness, whatever, but has a great game. Jarvis plays great. We go into this next round and we're up. Like I said, my recall is it might have been 18, but we were up big late in the first half. against Southern Illinois, end up losing the game. Otherwise, we're playing in Syracuse in the Sweet 16, you know? And I know you have, Coach Dan, Dan Searle, you got experience with Coach Dozell, and he did similar and even, you know, greater things. I think he took 5, right? Took 5, so Coach only took 4, but you know, it's just amazing to think that he accomplished that at those different schools. And you don't do that unless there's substance, right? There's a lot of sizzle guys. I think that's the thing. I think Coach Harrick comes across as a sizzle guy a little bit at first. He's so smooth. He's so cool. He can say paragraphs in words. He's just, and so it comes across as like, oh, I don't know. But I'm telling you, there's so much. I mean, this is what I tell people all the time. I learned in 1 week being around Jim Harrick that I knew nothing about basketball. And I spent 3 years and 51 weeks learning everything I could. You know, the cartoon back in the day with the little dog following the big dog. Hey, Spike, what are we going to do today? What are we going to do? I didn't talk that much as that little dog, but I followed him around and wrote down everything he said. And I'll tell you, the one thing that I couldn't do as a head coach initially that I stunk at was the only thing I couldn't watch him do. I was terrible at one-on-one meetings with players. I messed those up multiple times early on. I talked about other players with them not being in the room, dumb stuff, you know, that I learned over time not to do. But it was because I never got to see Coach have one-on-one with the other player because it's a one-on-one. But all the other stuff, I was able to observe and watch him, and he prepared me. Yeah, you know, I can go on and on and on about Coach Harrick. I think the 2 most important things that I learned from Coach Harrick was poise. He would say that all the time. He'd just say poise, poise. And they wouldn't get on. People wouldn't yell and scream at him. Wouldn't like here's a good basketball snippet for you guys. How many guys have you been around that stop practice in the middle of practice and just start talking for 2 and 3 minutes, just ranting about whatever, talking? Sometimes it's on topic, sometimes it's not on topic, whatever. Coach Harrick never did that. He would stop a drill maybe for 2-3 words, right back in the drill. The guys never got cold, right? They kept their sweat going. We didn't lose focus. He just was a master. He was a master at just saying, like, in 2 or 3 words, hey, this is what we need to be doing, and getting right back into it. You know? And I marvel at that because it's a skill I never, I tried to hone, but I never really got there. But I've been around a lot of coaches that couldn't hold his shorts kind of routine when it comes to that in practice coaching, you know, just, and most people wouldn't even notice that unless you're a real coach. You wouldn't even notice that, like, the difference.
Right. Hey, you mentioned earlier, and this will be the last Herrick reference coming from me here, but that you wanted to be him. You wanted to be just like him. And that maybe cost you along the way. And he was the one who actually said, no, you can't be, don't be your own self, be your own coach. Talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. He was very generous to me that he came to practice a few times. He came to games a few times.
Wow.
One of the highlights of my life probably is having him walk up to me after we played NC State, who was a preseason number 4 at the time, and told me that we ran the stuff better because Coach Godfrey was running a lot of the same stuff, and Coach Herrick was assisting there. Jeff Dunlap was on the staff, and he's like, you guys are running the stuff better than we are. He said that you guys took it out of the basket and jammed it down. I won't use exact words to use, but jammed it down our throat in transition a few times, just like, you know, we were trying to do, just stuff like that. And so it was such, I thought, high praise. We were down, I think 3 at the half, maybe it was 5 at the half to NC State in that game. And we had a chance to make a layup with about a minute to go to still have the lead going into halftime. I think Coach Godfrey circled the wagons and probably used some choice language at halftime, and they came out and thumped us at that point. But yeah, I was trying. He's just so darn good. You're chasing a ghost. You know, it's what it is. You're like chasing a ghost. And so you're trying to be, and you're not him, so you can't be him. And I think when you hear the line all the time, you can't kid a kid. You know, they know when you're being disingenuous. They know when you're trying to be something you're not. It just doesn't come through as authentic. And I remember one time he came to practice, and I walked over. I said, Coach, I'm really worried. I think they're bored. And we're doing the same stuff over and over again. And he just looks at me and goes, good. That's good. You know, that's all he said. That's good. Sort of, you know, I don't know if you've ever heard the long story about Coach coming to Coach Wooden and telling him, I won't tell you who the player was, but just railing about this player who was an All-American player. Oh, he doesn't, just complaining. And Coach Wooden just sat there the whole time, listen. And then finally, when the guy stopped killing the player, Coach Wooden just said, would you rather have him or not have him? And the guy was like, well, he's an All-American. He's like, then figure it out. Like, so it's just kind of like that. That's how Coach Harrick was. You just kind of like, well, that's good. And I remember this is one of my favorite. I got 2 or 3 great Harrick stories for you about basketball in game or whatever. This one's in practice one day in Stegman Coliseum. He walks up to me. This is probably in year 3. Okay. So the year we went to the tournament, not the year we got pulled. And he walks up to me one day, and I could tell this was really a proud moment for him. He walks up and he goes, Miss, it doesn't even matter if I'm here. And I looked at him like, I won't say the word that I was thinking, but you are blank crazy, coach. The only reason we're any good is, I'm just thinking in my mind, like, this is all you. But his point was, Rashad Wright, our point guard, knows the next 6 drills we're supposed to do. Everybody in the gym, assistant coaches to the last guy on the team, knows what the expectation is of each and every one of them in the next, 30 minutes. And they all know what they're supposed to do. They're all doing it, now him being there and holding us accountable, him being there and maybe raising the bar, because like, it's kind of interesting when you're around people. It's a great takeaway for me was, the year we went 8-20, he was a very different coach than he was in the other years. But I only had a sample size of that year because it was the first year I was with him. So I didn't know he was any different than that. But he tempered things down so much because he knew we weren't good, right? And so he was like to beat everybody up all day long with these false expectations that there was no point in it ultimately. But anyway, that whole thing where he said, it doesn't even matter if I'm here was just a total like, hey, I've done the succession planning. Hey, I've implemented the culture. Hey, I'm a tremendous leader because these things are in place. And if I did walk away and go play golf this afternoon, we would still have a productive practice. Now, I would still argue with him. It wouldn't be as productive as if he was in the gym, but it would still be productive because he had gotten us to that point. So yeah, he was a master. The other thing I'll share. Okay, so 2 other great in-game stories, but that'll indicate to you what a great coach Coach Harrick was. First one is our second year. We're at Ole Miss. Ole Miss, I don't think loses a game at home that year, except this one. I think they go 13-1 or 12-1 at home this year. And it's one of those years where I think Ole Miss has got one of those huge strength of schedules. We've got a huge strength of schedule, and we go in there. You guys probably remember D.A. Lane. And D.A. Lane, and I always mess Wheeler and Marietta up, but I think he was a Wheeler guy, right? Or was he a Marietta? Wheeler guy, right? And he played with Shreve, great team, a great player. Those of you who know DA and remember DA, remember there's probably not a shot DA has seen that he didn't like his chances. I can make that shot if the ball's in my hands. The only shot I can't make is because I don't have the ball in my hands. So DA comes up, this is crunch time, late in the game, maybe 2 minutes to go, on the road in the SEC, Ole Miss, undefeated at home, one of those really tough, drag it out, 1 point kind of type games. DA Lane gets the ball in transition, comes up the floor, and it turns into what coach called flanker. So flanker drill that we ran every single day in practice. It was usually the 3rd drill of the day. We would open up with 1 of 3 drills. We would do another drill of shooting, and then we would go into flanker most days. And really all it is 2 guys get wide, 1 guy up the middle. You try to get to the nail, right? The free throw line, jump stop at the nail. The 2 guys stay free throw line extended as wide as possible, plant their outside foot, 45-degree angle towards the block, and just 1 step above and 1 step off of the block. You catch the ball, you jump up in the air and you shoot, because he called that a college layup. We didn't want to over penetrate and give up the 2 points because we charge, right? So he pulls up right at the nail. And I think everybody, including DA, expected DA just jump up and shoot it on a 3-on-2, regardless of whether the guys defended him or not. He gave the ball up on the right side to a freshman named Stephen Thomas, who's a 5-man running the floor like he's supposed to. I get emotional about this still to this day. Like, the kid lifts up, makes the shot off the glass just like he was taught. The entire bench jumps up and yells, "Flanker." And I was like still today, I get emotional. I think about it. This guy has everybody on the same page. He just got DA Lane to give the ball up in transition, who, probably wants to be the hero, is just wired that way. He's wired to be the guy that wants to take the shot. And I'm telling you, I knew it that I was like, man, this guy can coach. Our entire bench, like there was nobody sitting there going, pouting like they weren't in the game. Nobody pissed that they didn't get to take the shot. It was all of us together, against Ole Miss and the world kind of stuff. And so anyway, we ended up winning that game and we ended up going to the national tournament. And I'm just like, man, this guy's unbelievable. The other story I'll share with you real quick that's in game is, so I don't want to go into, what went down at Georgia and all that kind of stuff, but we're having some serious stuff going on. And ends up being the last game we ever play. So we're up at USC. And it's another one of these really tough games. We have all this drama going on, and we end up playing the week before. We play Florida and Kentucky, who I think are both top 5 in the country. In that week prior, we end up losing to Kentucky in a tough game. We end up beating Florida. Both those games at Stegman. Now we go on the road up to South Carolina, and against I think, and again, this is where memory may not be 100% accurate, but my memory is that at the end of the game, we ran a play against Florida called side post clear, which essentially was just, you guys probably remember we were running the high post offense. It'd be at 1-4 high with the point guard has the ball. And normally, if you run what we call back door, you hit the high post on one side or the other, that opposite wing goes back door, and you see if you can get a layup off that. There's a whole lot of action on the other side of the floor that comes after that. Point guard comes off that high post if we don't throw the backdoor pass. So coach inverts Jarvis Hayes and I think Chris Daniels at Florida. So now it's the 4-man, the post is on the wing, the guard is on the elbow. We give the ball to the guard, who is a lottery pick. He takes the ball, faces up, makes the bucket. We win the game. Okay. So now we go up to South Carolina, and of course they've watched film. And again, I mean, I have this all perfect, but we run the play again at the end. And I think this is an overtime in my recall, because I remember Richard Wehunt had a corner 3 at the end of regulation that he normally makes but missed. And so we go to overtime. And in overtime late, as my recall on this play, we run this side post clear again. But South Carolina, because they're good and their coaching staff's good, they've scouted it. And so they take Jarvis away. So we've never practiced, what do you do if you can't give the ball to Jarvis? Never practiced it. Rashad Wright sees they've taken him away. He hits Chris Daniels on the wing. Chris Daniels drives baseline. They help over. He wrap around pass with the left-handed Steve Thomas. Steve Thomas lays it in for a layup. We win the game. And I'm telling you, like, there's major drama going on within the program outside of all this stuff. And I'm sitting there going, that's something we did every single day since Coach Harrick stepped foot on campus, but we never once did it that way. Never once had we said, but we had done everything so many times. Those guys just knew what to do. And it was like, to me, it was like, this may sound a little highfalutin or esoteric, but it was like jazz. They knew the 3 chords to play, but they also knew how to improvise. And so they allowed each other to improvise in the moment.
That's the dream. That's the dream of a coach, right? And you're saying Harrick did that all the time. You give them the frameworks, you give them the 3 chords, and they play the music, and it sounds great. And they did it on their own in the scheme of things. No, that's wonderful. I love it. I love it.
And that really, to me, that's competitive greatness. When you talk about the pyramid and Coach Wooden, and we would talk about this all the time, right? The competitive greatness being the highest one, and it's a love of a difficult challenge and all that. But the thing about competitive greatness to me was what you were trying to find was that moment, and they're fleeting and few and far between, where all 5 guys are in flow, right? Zone, whatever you want to call it, together. And that those moments, like, again, I think when my team played, I think I might have witnessed that for 2 or 3 times in 7 years for about 5 seconds each time. Like, it's so rare. I don't know, Corey, how many times you've seen it. You, Dan, I just think it's so rare, it's so fleeting. But again, it's one of those things you'll chase, because when you see it, you know it. Like, it's like that's it. Oh, it's gone. And maybe years till I see it again. But it happened. I know it happened. I saw it just then. And Coach Harrick, I will argue is one of the people that can make that moment happen more frequently than anyone else I've ever been around. And again, I can't say I've been around everybody or seen everybody practice or all those kinds of things, but yeah, he just had a knack for getting 4, 5 guys, on a page together, flowing and playing and being able to read the other 5, playing chess like we talked before, not checkers. Because it was that framework. We were very disciplined when you think about it. He was definitely not a personnel guy. It was a system. He was a system guy, right? We had a system and we stuck with it. But the system was genius. Like, I don't know how much time Coach Wooden must have spent figuring all this stuff out, but the fact that every drill was a 2-way drill. I mean, I only learned these things after being a head coach. It's the equivalent of like taking the class versus teaching the class. You learn so much more teaching the class than you ever do taking it. And so it was like year 3, year 4 of coaching. I'm like, have this aha moment, like, oh my God, like I had no idea, but that's brilliant. Like, that's why we do that. Oh, I was clueless to it, but it was only because I learned over time to have enough awareness, I guess, or enough intelligence, knowledge of the game to see it.
Experience. And you got to love it that both of your stories end with Stephen Thomas scoring. Let's go.
All right, so take us in, Miss, from now, your journey with Harrick, going from Jersey to Harrick to now having to leave Georgia. This is what in college coaching, to having to, bridge out a little bit, even though I understand it was with a Georgia assistant. But tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so what in college coaching is is the phrase that matters here, because all I knew was a little bit of periphery at University of North Carolina and then the University of Georgia. That's all I knew. And so Michael Hunt gives me a gift, not once, but twice. He asks me when he first gets the Towson job, sits in a house that my wife at the time owned, and I was living with, I wasn't living with her, but we sat in that house together, and he pitched us for hours. I don't remember how many hours, but why we should come up there. And I went and talked to Coach Harrick, and Coach Harrick and I kind of talked it through, and he convinced me that perhaps the best for my career trajectory was to stay at Georgia for a little bit longer. He thought he could elevate me one more time, potentially if an opening came up, and we were going to be really, really good. And so I decided to stay put. Then fast forward, 2 years later, all of a sudden I don't have a job any longer at Georgia, and I go down to New Orleans, and Coach Hunt says, "Hey, sit tight. I might have something for you." And so this is interesting the way this plays out. There's a guy named Dino Presley, who Dan Searle knows well. There's a guy named Michael Longobardi, who Dan Searle knows well. There's a guy named Dan Searle, who Dan Searle knows real well. And so Dan Searle has now left the staff, or is leaving the staff, and Coach Hunt knows that, I think, at the time. And so I could possibly take that spot. But then Dino Presley's leaving the staff. And I think, Dan, if memory serves, he's going to ECU to work for Coach Harry, and I think that's right. That may not be right. Was there a Drexel stop in the middle there?
Dino went to ECU, and Rob Senderoff had
Kent State. That's what I knew. It was an Ohio school anyway. So he went there before Indiana, and so that's all going on. And then I come up to Towson. Coach says, "Come on up," and I still have an opportunity. Come on up. And so I go back to Corey's phrase of what you know. So I fly up to Towson, and Coach meets me at the airport, and I'm sort of like, why is Coach Hunt picking me up at the airport? Oh, I guess it's because we're friends and we've known each other for years now. So he's been a nice dude. So he picks me up, and then we drive to Sam's Club, and we go get all the candy for camp. And I'm like, oh, and this I didn't tell the story very well. The reason I'm going up at this time is Coach wants to continue to have the conversation about maybe joining a staff, but he wants me to come work camp to try to figure all that out. And I'm going to stay at his house. Okay. So then we go and pick up this candy, and I'm like, why are we doing this? But I play along. We get the candy, and we get there, and then we get to the gym, and we unload the stuff in the gym. And Dan knows this gym. It's not gonna, I won't call it posh, right? So it's a nice gym, I guess, but it's quite different than what I'm used to. And so then Coach is like, all right, well, we got to get the baskets for here and here and get them over there for camp. And I said, all right, Coach, I got it. Get out of here. Go enjoy the weekend with your family. Tell me where the managers are, and I'll get this all taken care of. And he's like, no, you don't understand. It's you and me. We're doing this. And I'm like, what? And I'm sort of half thinking to myself, what am I getting myself into here? Like, this Coach and I are doing this? But my main thing is like, coach, you're a head coach. You don't do this. Like, I don't want you doing this. Like, get out of here. Anyway, we do all that stuff, and you know how it is at Towson. So now we go on the road, and because he does hire me, and I'm kind of crashing with Longobardi. Dino's on his way out during that camp week. It's a little bit like, Corey, remember when Cameron Dollar at 99 summer camp, he's there to start the week. By the end of the week, he's gone to St. Louis to work with Romar. And, so it's the same deal. By the beginning of the week, Dino's there. By the end of the week, Dino's at ECU. So now we're, except the difference is that Coach Hunt knew that was going down. I don't think Coach Harrick knew that was going down with Cameron Dollar. And then I go down to Orlando with Longobardi, and Longobardi's kind of showing me the ropes a little bit. And because I've never been on the floor on the road full time. So now I'm second assistant. Searle's gone, Sendro's gone, P. Wesley's gone, and so it's like, hey, I'm Colonial's probably best mid-major conference in the country at that time. And I'm a second assistant. So, hey, maybe I've rebounded okay from this Georgia debacle. And we're down there, and all of a sudden, Jeff Van Gundy calls Longobardi. And he's like, hey, I just got the Houston Rockets job. I want you to come basically be a special assistant to the head coach kind of thing. So now Longobardi goes, and I mean, in long story short, I mean, Michael Longobardi's been in the NBA ever since. Wow. Really great career. Was with the Celtics when they won the championship, was with the Cavaliers when they won a championship. So Michael Longobardi's great coach and had a great career. So now it's kind of like me on staff with Coach Hunt. And we ended up bringing in a guy named Lamont Franklin. And then Coach trusts me enough, I guess, to introduce him to a guy named Luke Streggy, who was one of our managers at Georgia, who's now at Middle Areas. He's been a great coach himself. I mean, a guy who can go to Hutch every year. His team's so good, and Corey, you know how hard that is. So, tough. You're a guy who's been to Hutch, and that doesn't happen every year. And for those that go frequently, then they've got to have a heck of a program, because that's not something you just snap your fingers and do. So anyway, Streggy comes on that staff as well. And that's kind of how that all evolved. But it was interesting though, Corey. I will tell you this: I never would have made it at Belmont Abbey College had I not had a stop at Towson in between, because I thought everything was Chapel Hill and Athens. That's all I knew. And that's why I tell that story about the camp thing, is that was what kind of like introduced me that, wait a second, not everybody has a million managers running around. Not everybody has unlimited resources. Not everybody has, flights. And I mean, we were busing everywhere. Wherever we played at Towson, we bust there. I can't even remember getting on a plane with those guys. We probably did somewhere, but I don't remember it. So it'd be 8-hour bus ride to Wilmington kind of thing. And again, now at Division II, that doesn't sound like a big deal. JUCO, that probably doesn't sound like that big a deal. But for that world, like the longest I was ever on a bus in Athens, Georgia, was from Stegman Coliseum to the airport. I mean, that's the longest I ever sat on a bus, maybe. I think we bust to Furman and some places like that too. I'm joking a little bit, but we bust down maybe to Georgia Tech. But and even then you'd spend the night sometimes before. Like, it's stuff that's just a whole different world, right, how that operates.
Yeah, in junior college, busing is a plus. We usually van.
Right, there you go. So
I thought you were bragging. My fault.
No. It's all relative, right? It's all relative.
All right. So take us at your time at Townsend. With Michael Hunt. How different was it than Harrick in the coaching part? Obviously, a younger head coach. Obviously all the other things we've talked about, but just the coaching part of it.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start off by saying, when you think about Coach Jersa's situation where he had never been a head coach at any level, and now he's an SEC head coach, and won games. I think his overall record was a winning record. Like I said, we started off 15-3. In fact, I'll get back to your question, but I'm going to give you one little divergence here aside. So I was sitting one day in the office as a young pup with Holland and Dunlap, and I don't know if this was Jimma, that's how we referred to Jim Harrick Jr., or whether it was still Coach Hunt at that point. But we were figuring out, coaches will sit around February time, January time. How many games do you think we're going to win? What jobs do you think are going to come open? Are we going to make the turn? So it was one of those types of conversations. Everybody trying to hypothesize and project. And so they started talking about, well, I think this actually was in year year 3 because I think we were doing pretty well at the time. And so they started talking about, well, let's try to do this and do that, whatever. And I sat there, I said, you guys are crazy. Like, why are we talking about winning every single game? I want to win every single game. I want to win a national championship. I want da-da-da-da. And they were like, slow down, young buck, slow down. Like, winning is having a job next year, And I sat there, I thought, oh, you guys, that's a defeatist attitude. I don't know what you're talking about. Every single game we should want to win, da-da-da. Fast forward till now, I kind of understand what they were talking about. And Coach Jersa's situation is a great example of it. You start off 12-3 and everybody's happy. You end up 16-14 or whatever we ended up that year, and you're fired. Now, if you'd have just gone 16-14 at a steady pace, you're 8-7 at the break and you're 16-14 at the end, you probably still have your job. So this is one of the things that those guys kind of taught me was like, hey, we want to go from 12 wins to 16 wins to 20 wins, maybe to 24 wins, and maybe down to 18 or 19 wins because you're gonna have a rebuilding year. But you don't want to go 32-3 because it's not sustainable and you're not gonna have a job then. And so, and those guys that they were at a stage in their life where they had children, they had mortgages, they had all these other things that I didn't have at that point. So I wasn't thinking that way. I was thinking like, I want to get on the floor on the road, right? I want to be a D1 head coach one day. Let's win. That's the way to get to that. Anyway, so to Coach Hunt had my recall, Dan, you correct me, had 2 years under his belt by the time I showed up. I think I was in his year 3.
Right.
And he had a 4-year deal, is my recall as well. He had one more year on the year we were together. He ended up going and taking an assistant position with Frank Haith at the University of Miami. There was a lot of stuff going on internally. I don't want to get too detailed about that at Towson that I don't think Coach Hunt appreciated or saw eye to eye with, and felt that he was going to eventually have a negative outcome at Towson. And so he wanted to get out before that negative outcome came to be. So I only had a 1-year experience with Coach Hunt. Corey, I think he was good. I really do think he was a good coach. He was an excellent recruiter. He had excellent rapport with his players, especially in the recruiting process. He was amazing at developing rapport with students and with their families and their circle. And I think he continued that rapport with them when he was coaching them as well. But I do think he was in year 3 when I got there, and I look back at it now and I can be critical, I guess, of certain things, or I can be complimentary of other things. I don't think I knew enough at that stage to really have any sense of, is he good? Is he bad? I was kind of just trying to get through the day myself, and he gave me the posts and said, hey, go work with the post players and make them better. And to be perfectly frank and honest, I don't know if I served him terribly well at that stage because I was trying to figure out how to do that. Like, I did it to the best of my ability. I worked hard. I don't think it was bad, but I don't know if I was a great assistant yet either. I was learning. I was trying to figure things out. And so I think we were going to turn the corner. I was disappointed when I found out that he was leaving because I did think we were getting better. I just think he felt like we weren't going to get better enough in the time he had left to get another crack at it and to continue building it with the administration that was in place at that time. I can't say he was wrong about his assessment of that. I mean, again, he knew more than I did because he was the head coach and had more information than my information was limited relative to his. But I think he was a pretty good coach, and I think he was on his way to being a very good coach. And I just think that he didn't have a support system in place that either he believed enough in or that believed enough in him. I think actually probably both, for that to reap the benefits. I mean, we hear the stories all the time about Coach Smith getting hung in effigy outside Carmichael early in his career. Kevin White having to defend Mike Krzyzewski early in his career for not firing him. All these stories you hear about these coaches that turn out to be Hall of Famers, the all-time legends, all this stuff, but they didn't win right away. John Wooden didn't win forever, and so all we think about is the 11 and 13 years or whatever that is, but if you go back and look at prior to that, I mean, they were just okay most of that time. I'm not saying they were ever bad. I'm not saying he wasn't a great coach. I'm saying their results. I mean, all I hear about every day at Belmont Abbey College when I was our head coach here was Al McGuire, Al McGuire, Al McGuire. I got so tired of hearing about Al McGuire. And but you know what? Coach McGuire had tremendous success early and not as much success later at Belmont Abbey College. Of course, he goes to Marquette and wins a national championship and everything becomes justified. But it's hard to win, and it's hard to win early in your career, I think. And so I don't think the short answer to your question, which I'm not capable of giving, I've proven to you over and over again with the response to every question you've asked. The short answer to your question is, I don't think there was a sample size large enough for me to tell you whether he was a good coach or a bad coach. I was with him for 1 year in his 3rd year as a head coach, and he didn't get enough time to for anyone to make a good assessment. I don't know what your thoughts are about years 1 and 2.
I was going to say about the same as you, and that sample size, not big enough to know, but system. You mentioned Harrick's system, and Coach Hunt did, I thought, a really good job of implementing a lot of parts of that 1-4 high. And in the CAA, you could run that and you get 1 or 2 more players, and that could have been a long run. But I also appreciate the way you told the story before the story, and you've got coaches sitting around in February talking about the next job and keeping going. And that's the rationale behind leaving a head coaching gig, right? Here's what's best for the family, for my kids, and for the career path. So it all makes sense. It fits together. And here you are, though, we'll call it out in the cold a little bit. How did you end up going then from Towson to Belmont Abbey, where you're settled in now? What was the connection, the opportunity, the people, or the luck?
Yeah, so here's another, I keep referring to these, and it sounds like it's always in pairs. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just the way my mind thinks, but this is definitely a pair of people who gave me a tremendous gift. And I think part of this evolved from really the Final Four. Right. And I'm going to talk a little bit for 1 second about way back when, but us running around. Like when I think about Brent or KY, Kevin Young, or the DOC, Justin Young, or Lee Miller, who you guys have talked to, Lance Van Vaught, Stephen Cox, the only guy I've ever met who put his height on his business card, Jay Gibbons, Coach G, Gordon Gibbons, all these guys that we ran around with. Well, another one of those guys we ran around with was Cord Wright. And, I had these other groups too, like, so JD, Jeff Dunlap and his wife, Dee Dee, they run this thing that's kind of on Saturday nights at the Final Four. It's a legend, right? They all get together, all their friends, and they find a place to do it, and they all watch the game together. And, so there was that circle, that group, this group that I just kind of rattled off the guys that we would run around with a little bit. And you two were kind of, in that and out of that and all that kind of stuff. But Cord Wright was another guy. So there's 2 guys, Corey Baldwin, who's on the call, and Cord Wright knew a gentleman named Dale Cool. And I knew that the Belmont Abbey College job had come open because Dick Mitras had taken a job at a school that's had 55 different names since he left. I'm just going to call it Augusta State. That's how most people know it. I think it's now Augusta University. It's had 5 names between those 2 names and now. And so their AD, Clint Bryant, who is a legend and just retired, who's also an Abbey alum and in our Hall of Fame, he goes down there. He's there for a while. He brings Dip down there because Dip's had a lot of success here, 8 years of head coaching here and having some success. So I know there's a job open, an assistant opportunity, because Coach has left. I'm now high and dry a little bit. Coach Kennedy comes in at Towson. He's not interested in retaining me. That's evident from the first moment I met him. And that's not a criticism. It's just he was going to go in another direction. And so at the time, my wife is pregnant with the first child. It's a difficult pregnancy. She's on bed rest. I'm scrambling to try and find a job and find a place for us to have benefits so that we can have this child. And so Coach Mitras is at Augusta. He's got an assistant here who may or may not follow. The wife is kind of deciding whether they're going to go or not. And either place, there's going to be a job open. I know that. And my then wife's family, her brother is at Georgia Medical College, which is in Augusta, and her father lives just outside of Augusta. So I know I got a place where I can crash if I can get the Augusta assistant job with Dip. And I know there'll be, if the young man who's here at Abbey goes down there, then there's no job there. There'll be a job here. So I reach out to Coach Cool, who I don't know. And he says, I don't know you from Adam. and I say, listen, I know Corey Baldwin, I know Cord Wright. I get those two guys to call Coach Cool to tell him I'm okay. I don't know what they say to him, but what I tell him is, hey, I'm going down to the Peach Jam regardless. I'm going to drive down 85 from where I'm in Maryland. I'm going to go right by your place. Just let me come by and say hey. So he acquiesces to that. And so we meet at a Holiday Inn over by the airport. He shows up and we're eating a Grand Slam or whatever it is they serve there, eggs and bacon and stuff. And so I give him the full court D1 assistant press. Here's my book. Here's why I'm going to make the program better, blah, 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 blah. This guy had only been to that point in time at Division II and junior colleges. I don't think he'd ever had that full court press put on him that way before. I don't want to say that I was extremely polished or anything like that, but I had my shtick down. And you know how that kind of thing can be. Anybody can be good for 15 minutes. Anybody can sound good in a short period of time. So I guess he was impressed because that night, after telling me before I came down, there's no way I will ever hire you. He offered me the job driving home that evening. And so I took the job, and I took the job mainly because, and I will always be indebted to Belmont Abbey College for this, they did not consider that pregnancy a pre-existing condition. It's Catholic college. They actually were happy that we had a child on the way, as opposed to other people that would have seen that as a liability. And so we were able to have that the child with benefits and with the comfort of knowing that and the peace of mind. So Dale Cool made that happen for me. Belmont Abbey College made that happen for me. But Corey Baldwin and Cord Wright had been, I should have said, Coach Cool's assistant at Spartanburg Methodist, had moved on since then. But when he called, and Corey had recruited a bunch of his guys at SMC. So these were two guys that Coach Cool had a confidence level in, a trust level with, and real relationship. And I would say probably more so with Cord than Corey, just because he had been his assistant. But there was many years and a lot of water under those bridges. So I know they're the ones that got my foot in the door. I'm eternally grateful to both of them for that. I'm eternally grateful to Coach Cool for providing me with the opportunity, and eternally grateful to Belmont Abbey College for helping us have that first child, and then, you know, enabling me to still be here 18 plus years later.
So crazy how things work because of, you know, obviously you're talking about Jim Harrick and John Wooden, you know, you're talking about the top, the cream of the crop right there of college basketball. And now all of a sudden you're relying on Cord and myself to help you out. You went to the
Just parallel universes, man. You're both Pantheon. They're just parallel universes.
Friends in low places paid off at the end. But so now you go there, you're the assistant for a couple of years. You end up becoming the head coach. We kind of mentioned you signing, you know, a kid down here in Atlanta that me and you had talked about.
Run and shoot.
Yeah, run and shoot. And I saw him play at a Cartersville League, David Archer League, baseline, Eddie Lee Wilkins Pro-Am, and kind of passed the word along to Miss. Funny how things happen like that. But anyway, you end up having an unbelievable run as the head coach. Played multiple national championships. I know you won't brag a lot, so we'll try to brag for you here. But played in multiple national tournaments. You know, unbelievable run that you had there. You're now in the lore of Belmont Abbey head coaches. How hard was it going from assistant to head coach at the same place? You had saw Jerser do it earlier in your career. Did you take any notes from that or no?
Yeah, I think you know, it's kind of interesting. Earlier you just mentioned friends in low places. I'm going to go with another Garth Brooks song, and I think unanswered prayers sometimes are the best things that can ever happen to you at times. And so I was going to leave the profession. I was going to leave the profession in year 3 under Coach Cool. Things weren't going well. I'm probably 37, 38 at this point. I'm not making any money. I'm kind of wondering if this is going to go anywhere. It's not looking like it's going to. So I'm trying to figure it out. And we just had our second child. And I thought, well, if nothing else, I could be unlike a lot of dads that I know and get to spend a lot of quality time with my 2 children while they're very young. And I'm not talking about just regular time, but I'm talking about all day long being around them. And then things transpired where our athletic director and our head coach were both let go. And basically I was just told to hold down the fort. And, you know, it can come across at times when you've heard that routine twice before, where ADs walk in and say, James Holland's the interim head coach, and we need you guys to hold down the fort, and we'll see how it goes. And now the second time, I think if my recalls correctly, they made Lamont the interim head coach and at Towson, and you guys need to hold down the fort. And it's sort of like, here we go, third time, you know, maybe it was the charm, but third time I'm hearing this of, we need you to hold down the fort, we need you to run camp, you know, stuff like that. And so I just kind of did all those things and kept doing them. And you know, it's funny, there's a real gentleman named Dick Dull was named as our athletic director. And interestingly enough, he had been the athletic director when Lefty Drizel was at Maryland and when Len Bias died. And I don't know if you guys remember this story, but the president basically told Dick Dull, you need to fire Lefty Drizel. And I think it was probably PR cover. I don't think it was anything other than that. And Dick Dull refused to do it. And so he got fired. Now, all that stuff probably would have played out that way anyway. So I'm not saying he threw himself on a sword that he may not have, you know, had the same outcome eventually regardless. But that's the kind of gentleman he was. And so when Dick Dull was hired, he came to me. We met a little bit. We went out with the lady who's now our faculty athletics representative. We had lunch, interviewed, all those kinds of things. And so it's a great guy. He figured out that I had written one of my master's theses on a guy named Walker Percy. He would tell me all the time, I'm not well read, but I'm well collected. And so he went and found a first edition volume of a book that I like very much, a Percy book that I had mentioned to him called Lancelot. And he just wrote put a card in the book and said, like, you know, you'll do great things or something like that. I don't remember exactly who wrote in there, but maybe it was just, you'll do great. And that's how I found out I was the head coach. I walked in my office that day and I opened the book and I saw that thing there. And I was like, oh, wow, like I'm the head coach.
No way. Okay.
So that was pretty cool, you know, that with the way that transpired. Now, I had, you know, along the way, you knew that I knew I was in play. I knew it was a possibility, you know, that it was like, but that's how I learned that I was.
Oh, and that's a intersection of your experiences, your past, your studies, your Ireland, your literature.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So that all kind of came full circle in a little bit of a way in that moment. And then, so now to your question, like, yeah, so now I'm a head coach. I've been an assistant coach. I've never been a head coach before. How do I make that transition? The one thing that I had in my favor was I had recruited almost all of our dudes. And I should say students, I apologize. That was a retro moment for me. I went back to 2000 something or other there. So all of our students I had recruited for the most part and had been primary in that role. So I had rapport with them. They seemed to be excited about the prospect of my coming on board. I do remember we were picked 11th out of 11 teams in the preseason poll. I remember going down and telling our team that nobody in our conference thinks that I can coach. They don't think any of you can play. And so let's go show them that they're wrong. And we proved them right for the first 5 games. I was 1-4. And I had a really pivotal moment. Unfortunately, the one win was a league game. So we were 1-0 in league, but we were 1-4. We had gotten thumped in the 5th game bad. The other games were all close. But the 5th game, we really got thumped. And I walked in the locker room and I said to the team, I know that you want me to come in here and yell and scream and cuss and start banging lockers and throwing stuff. But I said, I refuse to get out of character because you all won't buy in. And I said, the moment that you guys buy into what we're doing, because I know it works. I've seen it work. There's no ifs, ands, or buts or doubts about whether or not this stuff works. And there's also no doubt in my mind that you guys are good enough to do it. It's not a talent thing either. It's just a conviction, culture, buy-in thing. And so as soon as you guys want to make that transition, we're going to be really, really good. And until then, we're going to keep having this experience happen over and over again. We come home and some other things happen and we play our next game. It's a league game and we end up beating a league opponent, I think by 40 the next night. I think we end up going into Christmas break undefeated in league. I remember telling the team, talking to them about picked 11th and tell all those guys Merry Christmas, put 6-0 in their face or something like that. And then we come back in the second half and we should have won the league. We really should have. We were late in the league, had a chance to win it. I just think we hadn't been there before, kind of routine, and so we didn't know how to handle it. I think we ended up finishing 3rd. We would lose a big game in the last week, and drops us from maybe winning the league to finishing third. And then, you know, from there, it kind of just went from there. And I think really, honestly, Corey, everything I did was stolen directly from Coach Harrick and Coach Hunt, which was stolen from Coach Wooden. I just really believed in the stuff. I really, you know, whether it's appropriate to say or not, I drank the Kool-Aid, and I was 100% in. And I think if I got a job today, and I watched basketball today, and I realize I'm a dinosaur, but I think I'd still run it, because you got to teach what you know and know what you teach. And yeah, the shot clock got shorter, and you know, it's interesting. Coach Harrick told me that's why he went from a 2-guard front that Coach Wooden ran to a 1-guard front. Was the shot clock. He said it just wasn't enough time to go back and forth guard to guard to get into the offense. So I had to expedite that a little bit. So you might have to
Hope
find
the Georgia high school coaches are listening, right? As the shot clock comes into effect this year.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So yeah, you do have to alter. I don't know if you change, but you do have to adjust or alter, right? Evolve or die, all that kind of stuff. But you know, I've got tremendous conviction in what we ran. And, you know, this is how Coach, instead of me rambling on, I'll tell you what Coach would have said to you. He would have said, Corey, it's not the only way to play. It's just the best. That's all he would have said. That would have been it. And you'd be like, damn, like, wow, that guy, you know, he just, and he was just, he believed it, and he got everyone else to believe it. That's our word, right? That's the word to this day. Like, I got that from him, and we're at a secular institution. So, you know, we did it at Georgia, but here, of course, it has even more resonance. But we believe it's on our, I've came up with our mission, purpose, vision, core values, all that for the department. It's called the Abbey Way. The very first word under the Abbey Way is believe. Yeah, and I've had it on T-shirts. I've had it. I mean, you know, so it's just all that stuff. Like, in fact, right here, this is not a shtick. Like, everybody's going to see is, oh, you set this up. But here's right here. If this is Coach Harrick, we put it on our wall. The guys took it down from the wall because they don't like it, the new coaches. But right, so here's the big 5. Right, stance, concentration, balance, play hard. Quickness, sense, concentration, balance, quickness, balance, play hard. And then here's the 7 areas of daily improvement. This isn't even our logo anymore. But I don't know if you can see this one now. Back up some so you can see it. Right. So, but the logo is not even the current logo. This is what it was back in the day when I was coaching. But I still got those things in my office. Those are straight verbatim what we had on the walls at Georgia. You know, it was Georgia basketball. And if you remember what Coach Hunt wrote on the board before the game, Coach Searle, same thing. I mean, it was right. Belmont Abbey basketball here, but it was Georgia basketball. You know, so that when it started with offense, defense, rebounding, ended with play hard, you know, it's the same thing. I'm about to go talk to all of our students in our department. We got about 900 students. I do want to plug Belmont Abbey College just a little bit during this conversation. If this is not the appropriate time, cut me off. But
go ahead.
But we're the 7th largest athletic department in the entire country. That's D1, D2, D3, NAIA, JUCO. We have almost 900 students there. We're the biggest in the country without football. The only schools that have bigger, and I'm doing head count now here. I'm not counting you 3 times if you run cross country, indoor track, and outdoor track. Head count, right? Individual people. We're behind Ohio State, Michigan. Cornell's the biggest in the country. You know, so that's the company we keep from that standpoint. And shoot, I lost my train of thought again. What was I talking about?
You're talking about how great Belmont Abbey is with 900 student athletes, the 7th largest in participation in the nation.
Yeah.
And work, Mr. Athletic Director.
Hey, Miss, let me take you there. I'm going to stop you 1 second. And if you get the train of thought back, jump on and throw me away. But I think the one thing that you're kind of leading us into is exactly what I was going to ask. You've led teams from under a head coach. You've led your own team as a head coach, successful, obviously, in both of those. Now you're leading coaches to lead teams. You're doing some of the same stuff as what you're talking about, but how different is it for you? The relationships with students, the relationships with coaches, and just your own, you know, competitiveness and other things that you're dealing with.
Yeah, thank you. So where I'm trying to go next, I think, is just kind of what do I extrapolate from these previous experiences and take and interject them in trying to build our culture here at Belmont Abbey College. and try to create a culture of success, right?
Mhm.
And that will enable us to accomplish the goals and objectives that we have. And so, what I was trying to lead myself into before was just this big five, right? This stance, concentration, quickness, balance, and play hard that Coach Harrick would talk to us about all the time and put on the wall and all that, as kind of foundational cornerstones for our program. I'm talking to our students and our coaches all the time now about this next couple of weeks here, what I call the big five keys to life, right? So to me, if you show up and you work hard, that's over 90% of everything right there, right? I mean, you'll hear this all the time. People say 90% of life is showing up. And then if you can show up and work hard, right, then you put yourself in a position to be successful. And Coach Harrick would say this all the time: the only place you'll ever find success before work is in the dictionary, right? I mean, it's always going to come second, and it's an outcome. It's the price of admission. We would talk about that all the time. I think the third thing is attitude. I really have come to believe, and this is something that Coach Harrick taught me, both attitude and attention to detail, that these are really the things that separate or differentiate good from great. And so the better your attitude is, right? Because the only thing we really control at the end of the day, quite frankly, is our attitude. Can't control most of what happens to you, but you can always control how you respond to it. And then that attention to detail, again, is what I think really is a tremendous separator, as I said before, from good and great. It can oftentimes be the difference between, life and death, to take it to an extreme. But it certainly is going to be the difference and separator between, being average and being really, really good. And then the last thing is conviction, like that word believe that I talk about all the time. So those to me are the big five. And if you have those five things, really any avenue or path you decide to go down, you put yourself in a position to be successful. And those are all takeaways from my experience as being a little kid playing basketball, or my experience in New York City, or my experience in Ireland, or my experience in graduate school, my experience being exposed to various coaches, my experience with Coach Harrick, my experience as a head coach myself, my experience now as an administrator. And really what I come back to too is if you can have some gratitude and humility with all that, then you do put yourself in a position, because you're going to surround yourself with people better than you. If you have that gratitude and that humility, you're not going to think it's about you. It's not going to be an ego-driven thing. One of our core values, and probably the most important of the four, if I had to rank them, is transformational relationships. Nobody wants to be in a transactional relationship. We talk a lot here about having soul in the game, not just skin in the game. And a lot of this stuff becomes shtick, or can become buzzwordy. I think it's whether or not you're living it authentically, intentionally, and genuinely that separates, again. Because words and deeds, we all know, right? Everybody comes to your office and says they're going to work hard in practice tomorrow, coach. I'm really going to give you everything I got. I can't wait to get out there. I'm going to be a team player. I'm going to contribute. I'm going to sacrifice. I'll take a charge if you ask me, blah, blah, blah. And then you go on the floor. And in my experience, there's some guys that back those words up with deeds. And then there's a lot of people that either can't or won't, or you have to help bring along, and so.
Well, Miss, let's take you now. You mentioned shot clock earlier. We're going to take you through the lightning round. Be a lot of short answers, shot clock running, quick moving.
Well, let's put it in another framework for him. Instead of the Steve Miss answers,
give you the Harrick answer.
Let's go with the Jim Harrick answer. Exactly.
All right. So I'll start us off, Miss. I'll take us away from hoops for a second. When you were in Ireland, what was the food of choice?
Breakfast. I'm gonna again. My transparency gets me in trouble. The culinary delights in Ireland are not synonymous. I think that it is a place where you don't go to eat. There are many other things you go there for that are unbelievable. But I do enjoy what they call a fry up, an Irish fry at a breakfast is pretty good. So that's what you probably have to eat it 3 times a day. But.
What's your favorite place in Charlotte to eat? Right there near the Abbey, or in Abbey.
I'll tell you, in Charlotte, one of my favorite sushi place is Pisces. My favorite soul food place is Mertz. If you haven't gone to Mertz, you got to check Mertz out when you're in Charlotte.
All right, and then you have played at so many different levels. I think and been coached at different levels and done different things. we always ask this, and it'll be a good one. Worst place to play at or coach at? And that could be facility or crowd or both or
I'm
combination.
gonna flip your question a little bit and say to you, the most aptly named city in America is Starkville, Mississippi. Second place to Starkville, Mississippi is due west, and I'm gonna put in parentheses, of nowhere, South Carolina, and that's where Erskine is. So those are some places. Those are not my favorite two places to visit.
I love it. All right, what's the best place to play? Whether it's crowd or arena or one of each.
One thing I'll tell you I'm a little different about is I think once they throw the ball up, it's all the same. I mean, Rupp is no different than your gym if it's packed. Now, it's got to be packed.
Correct.
Once they throw the ball up, that energy and that vibe and all that kind of gets to be the same. I will say that Florida is a pretty great place to play for atmosphere. It's kind of cool when you see Sean Coleman punch the gator running off the floor after you've won, or Vanderbilt's got some pretty good fans as far as heckling goes, at least back in the day they did.
And here's my last one, and then Sir will take over the lightning round. What's the one time where maybe you thought you arrived, whether it was being Harrick's assistant or going to the national tournament again and again at Abbey, and then someone humbled you by maybe not even knowing who you were, pronouncing your name wrong, something of that nature, not making you pay as a fan to come in a game or whatever it may be. I always like telling these because we are off the beaten path. And even sometimes here we can get big for our britches and get pulled back.
I think the highlight moment might have been something like, I think maybe, this is interesting. I think maybe going to Final Four and having guys like that group that I just mentioned that you were part of.
Mm-hmm. You left out Snake, by the way. You got to add Snake.
Oh yeah, Snake. Former head coach. But and also like having Drew Molatoris, a former manager, Luke Strege, Jimmy Weekly, Tony O'Kane, Lee Miller, guys like that. The year that I was named coach of the year, which was the first year as a head coach, that year we nearly won the league and we were picked 11th out of 11. You guys kind of walked up, and when I would walk in the room, you'd say, Coy, Coy, Coy. And I thought that was like, I didn't expect that. And at first I didn't even know Coy, but it was like your peers were kind of saying you did something cool. And I think the best part about it was people appeared to be genuinely happy that it was happening. It wasn't like, yeah, we never liked you anyway, and or you're, or you don't deserve to be a head coach. I mean, I think you'll see those things where like, oh, I don't even know if this guy should be a head coach, But I remember that being kind of a fulfilling moment. I'll tell you the one of the moments that I thought was really sobering for me was cutting down the nets after winning the conference tournament to go to the NCAA tournament and not feeling like it was a big deal. Like it was this moment where you're supposed, like in your mind, I had blown it up like, oh, all these years, and I got to this point, and this is going to be so, almost like a transplendent moment. Like, it's going to be, I'm going to have an epiphany while I'm on the ladder, cutting the net. Something is going to come down upon me, and I'm going to have this great awareness or resolution. And I was kind of sitting there going, man, I'm trying to figure out what bus we're going to take to go to the national. And again, I never cut down a net after winning a national tournament. So, I'm sure that's a different experience. But it was sobering and interesting to me. And it kind of made me really understand what I had heard Coach Harrick and Coach Wooden and some people, literary figures, Cervantes, others talk about the journey, right? It's not the destination. Yeah. And I kind of realized in that moment, like, they're right. Like this moment, it's cool and all, but it's not what I thought it was going to be. But it's all the stuff, like it's the flanker story. It's the side post clear story. It's the other stories, the things that happen along the way, the fact that you and Cord called Dale cool. It's all that stuff that's really the meaningful moments. It's not the cutting down the net. And again, it's also the kids telling you, hey, I'm getting married in 6 months. I want you to be there. Or, we're having our first child, or I got that promotion. Those are the things.
All right, Cyril, your go.
These are good moments here. And listen, on this podcast, I don't think we've ever had Cervantes and Percy mentioned together. So that'll lead us right into, and this, hopefully you can give us a short answer, either what you've just been reading or the book we all need to read. Give us a good read here as we
Okay, I'm gonna share with you all one of my favorite books. It's a novella, so it's not a long read, it's a short read. And I've actually just been asked by one of our professors here to do I think it might be a podcast with him. And it's called A River Runs Through It. Many of you have probably seen the movie.
Great book.
But it's Norman MacLean wrote this book. It's the only novel he wrote, technically novella. I would argue it is not a short novel. I would argue it is a long poem. It's an epic poem in my mind. It's some of the finest language I think I've ever read. The last 2-3 pages of that book, I can't read without tearing up. It's and the thing that's interesting about the story with this professor is there's a line in that book where the father says to one son about the son who's, I shouldn't blow the book for everybody. It's a beautiful line. It says, it basically just says, he was more than that. He was beautiful. And it's a really powerful book. It's a short book. It's if you like fly fishing, you'll love it. So I think it's one of the best things I've ever read. So that would be one I would encourage you to check out.
great recommendation. A River Runs Through It. Love it.
And you can watch the movie. Brad Pitt doesn't look bad and all that kind of stuff. So,
Hey, Mr. Athletic Director, you're hiring. What are you looking for? And how do you find out if the person has that?
so I think, again, you're looking for work ethic. You're looking for intelligence. You know, it's interesting. This is I'll give you another. I'll drop another name of someone I've never met and don't know, but it'll be different than probably what you usually get on this webcast. Warren Buffett talks about, for Berkshire Hathaway, what are they looking for? And he says they look for work ethic, intelligence, and integrity. And the thing that he says is, if you have the first two and not the third, that's the person you most don't want to hire, because they are going to undermine your culture. They're smart enough, you know, and they're driven enough to really take your culture the wrong direction or to undermine your business because of the lack of integrity. And so I really do look for work ethic. I look for, you know, you wanted to have a knowledge base and an understanding, but really you want them to have character and integrity. We talk about alignment quite a bit here at Belmont Abbey College. If you're not well aligned with the institution, then it's a non-starter, your candidacy, which actually really frees me up. It's kind of like a lot of things in life that, you know, it's this tremendous freedom. It's like people all the time say, oh, you're gonna get married and oh, that's gonna shackle you down, and you're gonna get tied up. No, it's actually the most liberating thing in the world, because now I don't worry about a lot of other stuff that otherwise is part of my day-to-day existence and consciousness. And so same thing with this. The fact that I have to hire for alignment at Belmont Abbey College frees me up from considering so many candidates that really ultimately aren't in our students' best interest to be surrounded by. It does limit you sometimes in that you can't consider a certain candidate who might be a really good coach. But again, what we're trying to do is be successful and accomplish the following. We want to, and maybe this helps answer your question too, more in the lightning round fashion. We want people that are going to enable our students to reach their full potential, form and develop them so that holistically, mind, body, and soul, so that they can become great leaders, great parents, and great spouses. So if we're doing that here, then we're accomplishing our objective. The only other thing I wanted to throw in there that I look for is I look for people that have a strong conviction in their philosophy. And I'm talking about coaches now, right now, primarily. I don't care what the philosophy is. I don't need to agree with it. I don't even need to understand it. We have some coaches coaching some sports that I don't really understand the sport. But I want to know that when the wind blows, when you're 1-4, like that story I told you before, when you're 1-4, you're going to walk in that locker room and say, I am not changing a thing. Now, within reason, right? I'm going to make adjustments. I'm going to tweak. I'm going to evolve or die. But philosophically, this is what we do. This is who we are. You buy in and we will be successful, because 99% of this stuff is mental and it's conviction and it's getting people all on the same page. And that's what great leaders do. I mean, great leaders do two things and two things only, right? They establish the vision for the institution or organization they lead, and then they are relentless in their pursuit of enhancing that culture all day and every day.
There you go. conviction to go with that. And all the stories lead to that philosophical conviction and taking care of people, as you just wrapped up. That is a great place to kind of wrap things up. And let's come to a close here. Stephen Miss, the stories, the connections, the basketball and the humanity, and maybe even some literature there. This has been amazing. This has been an incredible conversation, I gotta say.
Can I just say how grateful I am to both of you for the opportunity just to hang out with two of you again? It's been too long. It's kind of cool to do this and to think back. But I also want to say one thing in more of the Coach Harrick vein than the Stephen Miss vein, right? Belmont Abbey College, BAC, be a Crusader.
There you go. Succinct.
I like it. All right, Cyril, tell us how they can follow us and watch us and read more about us.
You got it. And we'll give Coach Miss a moment here to wrap us up at the very end. But Twitter is the spot on the social media platforms, Off Beaten Path with a little underscore. Check us out there, follow along, and also like and subscribe. Here's your shameless plug, our OBP podcast right here on YouTube. So great stuff, great conversations. Go back, listen to some other ones. And this has been a big time conversation with so many little pieces to go in it. Coach Stephen Miss, thank you.
Yeah, Miss, we really enjoyed having you on. Been a journey. I've taken some of the journey with you. It was nice going back down memory lane, as you said, and thinking of some names that we hung out with and times we've had out there at the Final Four and other places. But is there any closing remarks you'd like to make before I shut us down and say goodbye?
No, just that I'm so grateful to, everybody that's helped me along my path and my journey. And you two are two of those folks. And I'm really, really grateful. And I'm blessed to be sitting in this chair. We have a great chancellor here at Belmont Abbey College, who's also the abbot of our monastery, Placid Solari. We have a tremendous president, Dr. William Thierfelder. Those two people have entrusted me with this opportunity. And I'm really, really grateful. I have three other cabinet members that I work alongside with, our provost, Dr. Travis Fizel, our CFO, Mr. Alan Mark, and then our vice president for college relations, Mr. Philip Rock. And I'm really thrilled to be a member of that team. And again, Belmont Abbey College is I'll use the phrase that Coach used all the time when he said, it's not the only way to play, it's just the best. This isn't the only place you could go to college. It's just the best.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And we've had a lot of mention here on the podcast. Me and Cyril joke everything evolves around the Florida basketball mafia, D3 basketball, and it's starting to look like Belmont Abbey. We've had a lot of references of Eddie Payne and Eastman, and Dip Metris was a guest on here, yourself. We've had some legends come through, but we really appreciate again, Miss. And this is a podcast for those who want to coach, those who used to coach, those who are coaches, those who follow coaches and help them, and for those who hire and fire them, which is what Steve Miss does now. And we appreciate your time, and we'll see you off the beaten path.
Peace, y'all.